Buenos dias, Gunners Collective TV. Back at it, you already know. Like a torta with some bad habits. Bye up, bye up. Let's get to the intro. Welcome back. And if you haven't already hit that like and subscribe button, make sure you go ahead and do that. Put your notification bell on all so that way you're directing the direction of the dope content that the gun stays kicking. And I highly appreciate the support, man. Thank you. I'm very humbled. So I got asked a question the other day, right? And well, I get asked a lot of questions, and this one right here in particular, I thought I should elaborate on. But before I do that, let me clean this fucking scraggly ass hair off my chest, right? There we go. Beard on confuzzle, right? Now, I wanted to tell you guys this. The question I was asked was, do Nortenos and whites go at it on the streets like they do in prison? Do they get off? Well, I'm here to tell you, nope, right? There's the video right there. That's your quick answer. But let me elaborate, man, and tell you why and how it goes down. So we all know that in prison, you have different groups. You have the Nortenos, the Southsiders or Sureños, depending upon their status, right? You have the Woods, brother, the Skins, who function with the Woods, but are their own entity. Then you have the Blacks, Crips, Bloods, Kumis, whoever else, Muslims, non-affiliates, and then you have the others, right, which are the Asians and Polynesian factions, and then the Paisas. Those are your predominant groups there. That's pretty much the group you're going to fall up under, one of those. You know, if you go in, you're a black dude, you're a Crip, you're going to go with the Blacks, right? If you're white, you're going to go with the Woods, brother. You don't have no choice unless you're a white Northerner or a white Southerner or a white Crip, and you're in trouble, right? And this is just how it's going to be. But in the meantime, in between time, you know, we all know that prison politics trump everything. Okay, when you're in the California system, you have to roll with the punches. Depending upon the yard you're on, the level you're at, whatever's going on at that particular time, whoever your faction is beefing with, if there is any fucking animosity and beef, that's just what it is, man. You don't have no say. So I don't care if your crime partners are good old Wood from the streets. If you guys are going at it with the Woods, you guys are going at it with the Woods. And if you happen to run into them, say la vie. You know what I mean? See you later. You got to do what you do. Now, prison's a different animal compared to the streets. There's a lot of things that happen on the streets that necessarily you have to leave at the gate. They're not going to happen in prison. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is. Okay. There are racial lines. There are different groups that don't function with other groups. They don't even walk on the same side of the yard. You know, there's no disrespect. Sometimes there is, but the majority of the times there's not, because something will pop off quick. It'll go up fast, right? Just how the California system is. But just because you don't get along with a particular group in there doesn't mean it's like that in the streets. You know, with the Norteños and the whites, the Woods, brother, right? There's not beef on the streets. There might be some personal issues. You know, someone robbed you, you got them, whatever, or you just don't like each other. But as far as all Woods on site or all Woods, fucking, we're going to get off because they're getting off in prison with the Northerners, and that's not the way it is. So let me dispel a couple myths. One of the myths is that the Woods ride with the Southsiders. Now, I always thought it was true, and I'm going to explain to you why. As I grew up and I got older and I realized and understood the politics of prison and all that, as I started going to prison, I realized that wasn't the case at all. But as a youngster going to the California Youth Authority, Fred C. Nellis in particular, right, when I pulled up, there wasn't very many white men or white boys, right? There wasn't very many. There was maybe one to a compa, two, if they were lucky. They were on life support there. There wasn't very many. But one thing I can say for sure is that there was some, if there was one, right? He was functioning. He was with the program. There's no doubt about it. I won't take nothing away from a Woodman. If that brother got there and he wanted meth, he was going to do meth. And that was that, right? The Woods that were there, or the Skins that were there, that were really dedicated to what they believed in, they functioned with the Southsiders, right? That's just how it was. They kicked it with them. They had their own beliefs, but for some reason, the Southsiders were like, hey, come over here. We got your back. But they had to be really, really down, and they had to function. If the Southsiders popped off, they had to pop off with them. Something cracked, it cracked, right? So you would see a Wood here and there, and if you seen them eating with the Southsiders or kicking it, then you already knew, okay, that right there's a good Wood. Right. And then there'd be the white guys that were over there in a different area getting took advantage of. I don't want to elaborate too much onto that, but it was wild. I've seen some wild situations happening with them. Right. But there were some good old woods, and they did kick it with the Southsiders. So I came to the assumption as a youngster, like, okay, that's how it is. The solid woods kick it with Southerners. So I always believed that because there was many times we got off in the school area or on the compa fighting or riots or melees, and a white dude would jump in, boop, what's going on, Wood? Right? And one thing I could say too, those motherfuckers had hands. They had super hands. Hey, they'd throw a slow ass punch, but it connected. And when it connected, Sasuke, you lost your eye like Charleston White. It was bad, right? Now, so that's what I believed for years. Now, when I got out of fucking YA and I'm kicking it, in my city, my town, Merced, there's woods, okay? Not necessarily groups or gangs of woods, but you'll have woods here, woods everywhere, right? And I've always been cool with them. Growing up, we had woods in my neighborhood that were just like cool dudes, white dudes, crime partners, fucking everything. They didn't care about North or South. And, I have my friend Roach, good fucking friend of mine, partner of mine, rest in peace, right? He didn't care about the North Side. He tried to act crazy when he'd get out of prison. Well, I don't know about kicking it with a Norteño, right? I was like, if you don't stop it. But I mean, we all smoke drugs the same, right? So he didn't trip. The thing was, every once in a while, he would tell these stories and he would talk about getting into it with Northerners inside prison, but he never talked about getting into it with Northerners outside of prison. Although one time we had to fucking knuckle up in San Jose. We'll get to that in a fucking Superwood episode. But as far as Norteños and Woods beefing on the streets, doesn't happen. Like I said, it has to, if it's like one particular group that burnt someone but there's no animosity because in prison, they're the enemy, right? And they're not consistently the enemy. It just depends on what's happening that day. But for the most part, yes, Norteños and whites are on opposite sides of the fence. They're on opposite sides of the fucking spectrum. They don't usually get along in prison. I've seen more Norteño incidences in prison with Woods, Skins, the whites, than I ever have with Southsiders. Let me say that again. I've seen the Woods and the Skins go at it with Norteños more than I've ever seen the Southsiders and Norteños beef. Riddle me that, right? I've seen Woods and Skins go at it with Southsiders, melees, full-blown riots, kicking it off, stabbings, more than I have seen them go at than I've seen North and South. Everyone always wants to believe that Norteños and Southsiders was on side every time, no matter what. There were some times when there were certain prisons in Southern California, or if the Southerners had that yard, that Northerners were not allowed to function on that yard. Eventually, a Northerner would get there and plant the flag, and sometimes the yards flipped. Sometimes it just kept on going and going and going. Northerners would have to keep getting off, or Southsiders would get off on them as soon as they came through the gates. There was incidents like that. It should happen. But over time, that ceased to be, the administration ceased to send Northerners to those certain particular prisons, and they started sending them to prisons where there was North and South, and there was a lot of respect given. So yeah, when you see these guys like on Hoodstocks, I seen a dude, and other Southsiders that are like, yeah, I functioned around Northerners. You have some that never did, and then you have some that did, and they always say, man, those dudes are just the other side of the coin. Respect to them, because it's like that. It would trip you out. This way before the end of hostilities, way before any of that. Norteños and Southsiders on the yard, there was a lot of respect amongst the groups. Now, they didn't fucking kick it, didn't say hi every day, and they were all friends, but there was some canalismo there without saying the word, right? The way that you showed respect. Like I said, I always was cool with the Southsiders. They always blessed with sopas, blessed with packages. We blessed them when we got canteen. Like, no raza did not eat. Okay, if I'm in the oil and I got canteen and there's a Southsider there, he didn't get nothing, I'm gonna say, hey, homie, Spencer, yeah, what's up? Shoot your line. They're not even gonna question it. All right, boom, they shoot their line, put a few sopas on a bag of beans, you know what I'm saying, a bag of chips, crush it up. Go ahead, homie. And they'd be like, hey, gracias. They never question it. It would be same thing. Next go around, I didn't have it. They'd be like, hey, shoot your linea, homie. Boom. And next, and it was always like a competition who could shoot more. I realized that trip, and I was like, fuck that. Last time I shot 8 sopas, I only got 15. I'm cool, right? You know what I mean? But there was always looking out for each other and respect. Buenos dias, buenas noches, all that. Okay? And you knew that when them gates cracked, it was on. The funk was on, because that's just the way it was supposed to be. But that didn't mean that you were going to starve. You know what I mean? Feed your enemy. I learned that a long time ago. Feed your enemy. You want them at their best. So when you perform, you know that you got them at their best. You don't want a vulnerable adversary. You do when it comes to strategic things, but you're not going to starve them into to starvation so you don't fucking fight. You know what I mean? Everyone looks out for each other, because at the end of the day, we're all convicts, and we're all going through a struggle. a similar struggle, whether you're white, black, brown, doesn't matter. We're all in a struggle. We're incarcerated, and it's us versus the canine. That's the ultimate goal, is to overcome what we're going through. That's a struggle. Now, on the streets, I've had incidences with white dudes, and all of them were petty, and all of them were because someone tried to burn someone or someone tried to get over, but it wasn't because a dude was in prison and was like, we don't like Nortenos. You know, I did have one incident where I was with Roach, right? And he had this couple dudes that just got out of prison. They were there. And we're kicking it, man. We're fucking barbecuing. We're eating. We're drinking. Everyone's having a good time. They're smoking away. I'm seeing clouds. I'm trying to push through the fucking meth clouds to see if he's all right. You know, because he's back there with 2 ex-convicts. And I don't know if they're trying to bone him. Like, I need to see what's going on. And so we get to talking, man, about prison and just chopping it up. You know, men talk, man. And I was like, oh, yeah, I was on this show. I was in Tracy. And he was like, yeah, what wing were you on at that time? And I was like, I was in J wing. He was like, man, there was a gang of those fucking busters there. I said, what? Right? What happened? He's whopping, right? All of a sudden went to Welga mode. I was like, because I was active at the time. I was like, whopping? He's like, oh shit, you're a Norteño? And I was like, yeah, homie, what's up? Yeah, there was a gang of fucking, I disrespected the wood. I fuck it. He was like, oh, brother, it's not like that, bro. No, I'm just saying, you know, that's just what we call them. And I was like, no, is that what you call them, or is that what the Southsiders call them? Because, and I'll say this is truth for any Woods that have ever been locked up, right? And I got a lot of respect. The Woods did kind of disrespect the Northerners the way the Southerners, like they heard what the Southerners were saying, so they would repeat it. That's how they learned how to disrespect. Them chapetes, right? Them fucking busters and chapetes are over there. I'm like, yeah, is that right? That fucking prankster gangsters over there. That's right, brother. I'm gonna stand on that. I skinned that, right? They'd be all fucking into it. So there was beef. 2006, Tracy Prison, Wolfpack. They were Woods, man, versus, you know, Northerners, bodies getting taken out of there, right? There was a lot of beef. And then besides that was just something I was directly involved with. But there was other things, or I came right as that ended. But there was other things that were going on with North and White. Now, with that guy, I kind of was like, so what's up, bro? Like, you feel some type of way? You know, I let it be known. He was a big old Wood, too. I was scared to death. I ain't gonna lie. I was like, them Woods, they were like, brother, let me hit this crank one more time, and then we'll see how you feel after that, right? Like, no way. But he was like, nah, bro, no disrespect. I'm just so used to being in there and us being at odds. But out here is different. Like, I don't have nothing against Norteños, right? All of a sudden, it was Norteños, though. It wasn't Busters no more, right? And I was like, all right, that's cool. And we ended up being cool. He was a cool dude, but I kept him at arm's length because he spilled Northerner blood, or a claim to. And back then, it was like, you can't function around that. But then again, I understood that Whites and North, there was no beef on the streets. Like, I didn't even understand why the Whites and the Northerners beefed in prison until I understood it was because a lot of the times back in the days, the Southsiders would utilize the Woods to do their bidding, to get off where they were mad at. See, they would function and they would have, like, not an alliance, but they, in some prisons, they would be cool with each other, right? And so if Northerners got on the yard, they would tell the Woods, like, hey, you know what I'm saying, we're going to get off on these dudes. And they'd be like, we got you, brother, right? You know what I mean? And they were just down with it. So that's where a lot of the animosity built. It wasn't because Northerners functioned with blacks or they were on the same side of the yard with blacks. I mean, to some people it could have been, right? From the outside looking in, there were times when Northerners did function with blacks, the CXIVers, you know, dudes from Stockton, Sacramento, all throughout Northern and Southern California, there were CXIVers. They were Crip 14ers. They were Crips that were down with the Northerners, and that were like basically Norteños. They were embraced, loved ones, right? That's how that went down. And I could see where the Woods, because their adversary was supposed to be blacks. And look, and I'll even say this is the truth. I've seen more incidences between North and Woods or South and Woods than I did with Woods and blacks. You don't never hear about shit with Woods and blacks. Everyone thinks, oh, blacks and whites. And I hear a lot of the brothers say that. They get mad at the Southsiders because they always say, oh, Southsiders, you guys roll with the Woods, man. How are you guys getting rolling with them slave masters? Whatever they say, right? They have their own feelings on what they say. And I respect it. When you went through some shit, you can speak on it, right? But the truth of the matter is, it's all bullshit. Because when's the last time you heard of a riot over race, a racial riot in prison? When's the last time you've seen whites versus blacks, or heard of whites versus blacks in anything, on any type of riot? I'll hold. You know, it's been since been about fucking 30, 40 years. It just doesn't happen. Okay, the Woods are not going to disrespect the blacks, and the blacks are not going to disrespect the Woods. They're not even going to talk to each other. With less interaction creates less fucking controversy, right? Creates less discomfort and bullshit. So it's not going to happen. With Norteños, if the Southsiders have a little something going on with them or vice versa, then the whites usually will somehow get involved. Now, the last time that you did see black and whites, excuse me, it's been less than that, was in Pelican Bay when they were getting off on each other, right? Viciously. And that was prior to the Pelican Bay riot between the Southerners and blacks that popped off. And it had nothing to do with that, but they were going at it every time they hit the yard. It was a black and white thing. It was over disrespect. It wasn't over color. It was just over disrespect. But as far as the Norteños and Woods, getting back to the original question, were they adversaries on the streets? No, not at all, man. Never. In fact, because Northern California, and I can't speak for Southern California, but in Northern California, because there are more woods in Northern California, like Shasta, Cocoa County, you got a big stronghold of woods out there, skins. Most of the skins were from Southern California, but you do have like Shasta and Humboldt and all these counties. As you start to get more up Northern California, I mean northern, not Central Valley, but northern, you're gonna have a lot of good woods. And the majority of the guys back in the days were Norteños, so they did a lot of willing and dealing in business with Norteños. They grew up with them, so there wasn't no beef. It wasn't automatic, because one thing about woods is they're not gangs. You hear about groups in prison. You hear about the Fresniks, the Sacramaniacs, the American Skins. You hear about the Wolf Pack. You hear about Peanut. You hear about these different groups of white men, right? But on the streets, they necessarily weren't doing that. Not in Northern California. Maybe in Southern California, you had skinhead groups or whatever. They had little gangs or little groups that had names to them, titles. But in Northern California, you didn't have that. You had Oakeyville, and you had Oildale, and you had Bakersfield, and you had these different woods that were established in different places. But there wasn't like ongoing beef with Northerners because of prison politics. See, that's one thing I enjoyed about that group, is they didn't let the prison politics dictate their program on the streets. See, most of these white men that were locked up didn't go in with racial hatred in their heart, didn't go in as a wood brother. They didn't even say that. They were just, I'm just a white guy, brother. I like smoking crank and not taking showers, right? You know what I mean? And that's just what brother, you ask any white dude, hey, what do you do, bro? I'm a mechanic. They can fix anything, huh? Yeah, I'm a mechanic, mostly lawnmowers, but every once in a while, brother, an electric bike. That's just how they get down. So then they go to prison and they understand the prison politics. You have to stick with your own race, your own kind, your own group, your own gang, your own gaggle, your own whatever, right? And then they kind of adapt to the philosophies that are being, the propaganda that's going on in there. And so you'll see a young white dude that fucking was a Mac Dre fan come out with a swastika under his eye. And you're like, bro, you weren't doing, you'll see him like in the neighborhood, like, damn, bro, what happened? Hey, brother, I went to prison. Well, why are you talking like that too? Talk like you really talk. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Cuz and you'd be like, what the fuck? What happened to you, bro? Me and you used to cruise listen to 50 Cent. Go, shawty. It's your birthday. Next thing you come out like, bro, put the Slayer on, brother. You know what I'm saying? Wherever I may roam. Like, bro, how did you go from listening to Sade to Metallica? No, brother, I still like Sade. I just wouldn't fuck her because she's black. they're different. Actually, she's Indian or something like that. Yeah, too black for me, right? They just change. But the moral to the story is, the moral to the content is, no, to answer the question, Norteños and whites do not beef on the streets. That's a prison thing. And it's not necessarily beef all the time. There's no groups that it's like all the time except for the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs want it that way. That's why. The Bulldogs had an opportunity to conform to and the word conform is a big word for them, right? Because they're renegades and they don't conform to shit. But they had an opportunity to conform to the end of hostilities and to be out on them yards with everyone and doing their thing. And maybe put some shit of the past to the past, right? But because of their beef with Norteños and because of their beef with the Southsiders, they just wouldn't let it go, man. The Bulldogs are independent, and that was that. So they're like the one group that's on site by North and South, not by the Woods. Like, they're on yards with Woods. Woods ain't tripping off them. Yeah, I was over there with the SA. Like, wait, hold up. That's a Bulldog. That ain't an SA. SANA, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Same shit, right? That's how they do it. Anyways, I wanted to put this video out there to answer a question. I do got another video that's I'm going to possibly do today, man. I just thought about the content on it, so I'm going to do it. But make sure you guys tap into the collected clips. I'm introducing a new super today, and then I got one of them good old ones that you guys like all the time. So with that being said, thumbs up or thumbs down. Heavy's going to be the head that wears the crown. I'm going to continue to strive, struggle, and strive for what I truly believe in, and that's the betterment of all people. And like I said before, man, just because there's animosity and shit in prison with the whites and the Norteños, I've never seen that spill out into the streets. I've never seen a Norteño be like, oh man, we got to hit white dudes because they fucking down to homeboy in prison. It's never like that. It's just like whatever's in there, whatever happens in Folsom stays in Folsom. With that being said, I'm gonna get up out of here. Thank you guys. I appreciate the support. This is the gun. Bang, bang.